Hello, I am the Trump Democrat, and today I am looking at a video posted by a user called the Red Elephant, and he's claiming that Alexandria Ocasio Cortez may be mentally ill. Well, this may be pot calling the kettle black, but let's take a look and see what he has to say.
Okay, so we all knew that Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, based on what I showed you in my last video, is at the very least economically illiterate. However, after these last few clips that I saw on Twitter of her, she might very well be mentally disabled. Now, I can't confirm that for sure. This is just pure speculation on my part, just based on the words coming out of her mouth. But she was recently pressed on the unemployment rate here in America when someone was asking her, a journalist was asking her about her plans, her socialist plans for America, and her hate and disavowal of capitalism. This reporter asked her, "What do you say about the unemployment rate being so low here in America?" And here is what she said.
That was really your rallying cry in your campaign. It was always about working class Americans. You talk about the top versus the bottom, not the left versus the right.
Right.
Now, the economy is going pretty strong, right? There's roughly 4% unemployment, 3.9% unemployment. Do you think that capitalism has failed to deliver for working class Americans, or is no longer the best vehicle for working class Americans?
Well, I think the numbers that you just talked about is part of the problem, right? Because we look at these figures and we say, oh, unemployment is low, everything is fine, right? Well, unemployment is low because everyone has two jobs. Two jobs.
Two jobs.
Two jobs.
That's why the unemployment rate is so low.
Two jobs.
Don't get too excited there, Red. Can I call you Red? Now I know this wasn't the most eloquent answer that Miss Cortez could have given, and she's clearly not very experienced in these types of interviews, but let's help her out a little bit. What she should have done is she should have first attacked the premise that the economy is doing great instead of nitpicking about, one issue. There's a lot of things you can say that we all agree on that tell us that the economy is not doing great and that the unemployment rate is not the only metric that we can use to decide is the economy doing well. Now, of course, whether someone has one job, two jobs, three jobs, they're still considered to be employed, so it really doesn't matter in that sense. But that doesn't mean that what she said is totally wrong either. Now, every economist knows that when the unemployment rate is, say, somewhere between 3 and 4, 4.5, 5%, we're considered to be at full employment. Now, why is that? Why wouldn't full employment be 100% or 0% unemployment? And that's because human beings are human beings, just that. So we're always moving, we're always in flux. So at any given time, there is going to be a certain small percentage of the population between jobs. People, move. People get mad at their boss and they quit their job and whatever. This happens all the time. So even if we're at, 3.5, 4% unemployment, we would technically still be considered to be at full employment. And these people who, dropped out of the workforce temporarily will find their way back in reasonably quick. And other people who were in the workforce will trickle out for a little bit. That's what happens. You follow? Okay, good. So if that's static, let's say um, the percentage of people working more than one job is abnormally higher right now than in a given portion in the past. So if these people get mad at one of their employers or whatever, one employer lays them off, whatever, they wouldn't necessarily trickle down into that unemployment category because they're still employed. They still have one job. So having lots of workers work multiple jobs in some way does insulate the unemployment rate a little bit from these fluctuations, that a lot of people would have that would cause them to be unemployed, but they're not. They're just reducing their employment temporarily. Now, I know that's not funny. That's not a quick kind of answer that you can give in an interview, but if you think about it, it really makes sense.
She also said something that was just a step below that in ridiculousness and stupidity when she talked about the working long hours, and that being another reason why the unemployment rate is so low.
Unemployment is low because people are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week and can barely feed their kids.
Now, this is a candidate that the Young Turks boasted, that Cenk on the Young Turks boasted about doing 34 videos on.
Done. Ocasio Cortez wins.
Ocasio Cortez wins. Crowley loses.
Unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs.
So he did 34 videos. He helped this candidate get elected. A candidate that, as we all see by now, knows absolutely nothing about geopolitical issues, knows absolutely nothing about domestic economic issues, knows absolutely nothing about anything that we've seen so far. Every single time that she talks, she makes everyone else less intelligent with every single video that comes out and every single clip that comes out of her talking. Now, this is someone that Cenk boosted on his platform, a platform, mind you, that gets 12,000 live viewers every single day at the very least on every single show that he does on YouTube. And these are actual people that listen to him. These are actual people that listen to what he has to say as if he's has any bit of intelligence in him whatsoever. He boosted this candidate. He boosted a candidate that said that the unemployment rate is so low because everyone has 2 jobs and that people are working long hours.
Now, I'm not here to defend Cenk, but I do find interesting is why is the economic right so interested in this Democratic primary issue, this Democratic primary that Miss Cortez won? And it's because they're really scared. And of course, they'll never admit it, but that's why they are trying to take Miss Cortez down right now. They're really scared, not just of her, but that more candidates like her will come up. They like running against idealist candidates like Hillary Clinton, who, even if they win, are really only a little bit left of their preferred policies. So with Hillary Clinton on the ballot, what's the worst that can happen? Not much. And so again, here we have Alexandria Ocasio Cortez not being super eloquent in her answer, probably a question she wasn't prepared to answer, and not having her talking points memorized. She's not a Hillary Clinton style candidate where she has 6 pages of talking points memorized and can just rattle them off one after the other like a robot. But what she's trying to say is there are millions and millions of Americans working 60, 70 plus hours a week and having an increasingly hard time getting by. Now, that's pretty much a fact. I don't think there's anybody who will deny that's happening and that it's happening to more Americans. More Americans are having to work harder, longer, for less. Now, one side of the picture, the right, says, well, that's fine. Better them than me. They're losers. They suck. And yeah, as long as I'm not them, I don't care. And there's another half of the American economic spectrum that says that should not be how America works. That's not the kind of country that we have. And that's really what this is all about. You think that's fine that people work more for less, and we think there should be some type of way to even things out at least a little bit.
See, does he agree with us? Cenk, do you agree that the unemployment rate is so low because everyone has 2 jobs? Is that the reason, Cenk? Do you agree with your girl, Ocasio Cortez, that you made 34 videos about on your platform and helped her get elected?
Ocasio Cortez wins. Crowley loses.
Now, she also said that the way to get more people voted in like her. Now, I'm not sure if she's talking about socialists or people with Hispanic last names, because if you look at the district New York 14 and you look at the actual demographics of that district, you can very much tell that she was probably purely elected on her last name only. No one knew about her policies, her ridiculous comments, or what a democratic socialist is. They probably, half of them probably don't even speak English.
Wrong.
So yeah, that whole Bernie Sanders thing about how he almost took down a political juggernaut, a political dynasty, with no corporate funding of any kind. I guess a lot of the voters must have just thought, Sanders sounded kind of Hispanic, maybe. I don't know. And, Joe Crowley has been in Congress since 1999. And before that, he was a member of the New York State Assembly since the 80s. So, maybe all that time, maybe people thought his name sounded Hispanic, and now they just realized, oh, it's not a Hispanic name. Go figure.
But she said that she wanted to expand the electorate. Now, the last time that particular term was used was when women couldn't vote, expand the electorate, and when black people couldn't vote in America, expand the electorate. Now, what does she mean by expand the electorate? Well, let's listen to this clip first, and then I'll tell you.
And there, we wanted to start with Alexandria. If you could talk about how you think you achieved this victory, what exactly you did.
Yeah, and I think that I do think that the way that we won in New York 14 is a model for how we can win almost anywhere. I knew from the outset that, I had no misconceptions of the fact that the New York political machine was not going to be doing me any favors. And so I tried to kind of come in as clear-eyed as possible. And I knew that if we were going to win, the way that progressives win on an unapologetic message is by expanding the electorate.
This is what she means by this is how we get more people like her elected. This is how we change this system of white supremacy that everyone talks about, and you hear all of your professors talk about, and you hear all of your media talk about, and you hear every single university talk about, and you hear every leftist talk about, and you hear every progressive talk about.
Did you catch that there? Did you catch it? His pivot. Now he's trying to pivot back to identity politics. He did it right there. Now that's not the message that we've had from Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. She has put an economic message forward, and I know you would really much prefer that she be putting an identity politics meme forward. You guys know that. You can win against it all the time. And what she means by expanding the electorate is get more people involved, get more people to come out and vote, because there's actually somebody on the ballot who cares about them, who is going to fight for them, who is going to put forth the real reforms to make America work for everybody, not just the fortunate. And look, we know this because the economic right, they need, their lifeblood is millions of white Americans going out and voting for the policies and interests of the very wealthy, and doing so because of identity politics. That's the name of the game. Getting millions of people convinced that the other side hates them because they're white, or that thinks they're evil because they're white, and therefore you have no choice but to go out and make sure that the Koch brothers have as much money as possible. That's the way we're gonna fix America. Get more money in the bank accounts of the Koch brothers and Sheldon Adelson, and then everything will be great. And I'm not saying that there's not elements on the left that tend to be anti-white, because there are. And I'm not saying that the left sometimes plays identity politics. They do. I fight them when they do it too. But that's not the case here. You don't have an identity politician. This is not Hillary Clinton. okay? Someone who has no ideas, no plans for change. This is somebody different. And I know you love to run against the old model, but that's not what's happening here.
Smash the system of white supremacy by electing more people like Ocasio Cortez based solely on her last name. Expand the electorate by letting illegals flood into our country and Hispanics flood into our country, which there's only really one country, two countries where the source of our immigration is coming from today. This is the person that the Young Turks did 34 videos about. Do you think that their platform is very credible? Do you think that their platform has any sort of political knowledge to share with you that you don't know already? To any sort of facts or statistics or anything that is actually true? Cenk sounds like a bumbling fool every time that he talks. And this is the reason why I think a lot of the kind of middle of the ground pundits like Steven Crowder make fun of him a lot, is because he just sounds like a bumbling fool every time that he talks. And this is exactly what she means by expand the electorate, in my opinion. And I mean, who else can she be talking about? Who else doesn't have the right to vote in this country? And then she talked about a guaranteed federal jobs and a guaranteed federal housing.
And to also reject the argument that these things don't work, that housing as a right doesn't work, that healthcare as a right doesn't work, that, you know, if you expand it to states, that universal college and trade school education doesn't work, because we can prove that they do on municipal and statewide levels.
What is she talking about? Where has it worked in any municipality? Where has it worked in any municipality in your district in New York 14? Where has a federal jobs guarantee and a federal housing guarantee worked? Anywhere. Where has that worked? What is she talking about? Does she even know what she's talking about? I know when someone pressed her on the whole, there was the Middle Eastern and the Israel-Palestine conflict. Someone pressed her on that, and she said, when asked to go in depth and actually elaborate on the situation and what she means by some of these things, she says, you know what, I don't know anything about geopolitics.
Do you think you can expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd also I am not the expert on geopolitics.
So it seems to me like she hears talking points on Facebook groups or talking points on Twitter, or she sees tweets here and there, or she sees Facebook posts here and there, and then they're in her camp, right? They're on her side of the aisle, in the progressive aisle, and so she just repeats them and regurgitates them and has never ever been challenged on anything, because she's completely lived within this echo chamber her entire life of protesting ICE and calling for the abolishment of ICE and calling for open borders.
We have to occupy all of it. We need to occupy every airport. We need to occupy every border. We need to occupy every ICE office.
They're just breeding these types of people in our universities today, and they are completely lacking in any knowledge about anything. They've just been told this. They've been told that this works. And when challenged on it, this is probably likely the reason why most liberals have never wanted or accepted any sort of debate offers. Any far-left progressives have accepted any debate offers. Why you can't really approach them in the street and actually have an in-depth conversation about policies and political issues and geopolitical issues and things of that nature. They can't be approached on the street. They'll shut down. They'll turn around. They won't talk to you whatsoever. This is probably the reason, because they don't get challenged on these things.
And look, I think some of the zeal, especially on the immigration issue and the calls to abolish ICE, is misplaced. I think even if you listen to what Bernie Sanders said, basically when he was asked about abolishing ICE, and he kind of just like, what, are you serious? We know you can't abolish ICE. You can't have no immigration enforcement whatsoever. And if you want to abolish ICE and make it the same agency, just call it something different to claim a political victory, that's one thing, but we do need to have some type of enforcement on the border. And I think everybody who's serious on the issue is aware of that. Even Barack Obama, deported more people than any previous president. So yeah, there's no way we're going to have open borders, and that's another thing that the economic right is using to scare people. And no, candidates like Ms. Cortez don't help matters when they um, give into or participate in that kind of rhetoric.
No one talks to them except for the people who absolutely agree with them. And this is the world that she was living in before she got shot up and surpassed Joe Crowley in votes, which, by the way, there was only a very small amount of votes in the actual primaries. So this leads me to my next topic about this whole thing. Now, Joe Crowley is actually still on the ballot. They might be trying to... They got into this Twitter beef, Ocasio Cortez and Joe Crowley. He's still on the ballot. She says, take yourself off the ballot. Take yourself off the ballot. And he tweeted back at her and he said, the only way my name can come off the ballot is if I die or if I move out of New York, and I'm not planning on doing either anytime soon. And so I think that they're trying to leave him on the ballot because they know that the primaries was a very small percentage of the votes, and the actual midterm elections in November will get the largest vote share for people showing up to vote in the polls. And likely Joe Crowley will still be elected even though he lost in the primaries, it's really not how the system should be working whatsoever, but they've been doing this forever and ever and ever. My theory is that they think that if left on the ballot, because the media is exposing her stupidity in the way that they're doing, even the left media is doing this, because they're all exposing her for her ridiculous comments, exposing her, showing that she has absolutely zero knowledge whatsoever when it comes to macroeconomics or microeconomic issues at all, that they might lose that district come November because she's been exposed. She's all over social media. Everyone knows who she is. This is the leftist that they were trying to prop up. The Democratic Party was propping her up. CNN propping her up. This young leftist, this young progressive one. Look at her, look at her, look at her. And then all of a sudden they all found out that, whoa, wait a minute, this chick has absolutely no idea what she's talking about at all. Maybe we got to kind of do a little backdoor deal like we did with Bernie Sanders and figure something out here. Now, the reason why they did that with Bernie Sanders is because we all know why. The Democratic National Committee is completely corrupt.
It's because the Democratic National Committee is controlled by a lot of people who economically think a lot like you do. They don't want to make the real reforms that Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio Cortez want. They're not interested in that. They want to keep on with these Clinton-esque minor tweaks here and there, help a couple people here and there. We're not going to take everything from everybody and give it to the rich. You guys can still keep some, but they're going to get most of it. And I know you would much rather nitpick the idiosyncrasies of each argument Alexandria Ocasio Cortez makes. That wasn't right there. Okay, that's not 100% right. Okay, that wasn't very eloquent. Instead of looking at the overarching broad message of her campaign and the campaign of Bernie Sanders. And that is that the current American economy is not working for millions and millions of Americans, and every day more and more Americans join those ranks of people for whom the economy isn't working for anymore. And if we want to save any elements of our current market capitalist economy, there need to be reforms. There need to be changes made to get the economy working for the majority of people again. Not have a nation of people working 60, 70 plus hours a week for $10 or $11 an hour. And I'm sorry, I know you love living in this cutthroat, socially Darwinistic utopia that we currently have, but there's a lot of people that don't like it and want to see real changes made. And the reality of it is that we are going to have to eventually confront these challenges. How do we move forward with an economy based on employment when you reach a point where there are so few jobs needed that most people won't be able to be employed? And that's going to happen one day. Every day, automation displaces workers, and we're eventually going to reach a point where we won't need millions of people out there doing menial work. We just won't. And I know that your answer right now is to cut wages, let workers compete against machines to stave off the point where it becomes more profitable to automate. So tell these people that, oh, you're upset making $9 an hour. Well, they're just going to automate you. You need to really go down to like maybe 6 or 7. That should give you at least a few more years before the technology gets even cheaper. And then, even at that level, it'll still be cheaper for you to be replaced by a machine. We could start making some reforms now to make that transition easier, or we can just go full speed ahead into the wall, like we saw in Russia in the early part of the 20th century.
But this is what they're trying to do. It's It's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, because if somehow she is successful in getting Joe Crowley off the ballot, which he said the only way is by if he dies or if he moves out of New York. I don't know how that's a weird system there. It's a very strange system. It's almost like here in California where you have the primary, whoever gets the top 2 votes, whoever's the top 2 in votes goes on to the midterm election, no matter if it's 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans or whatever the case may be. Weird system in New York 14 there. But I think that they're very concerned about that because of the way that the media has been exposing her and showing the things that she had to say, showing the things that she has been saying. And now they're kind of worried, like, oh, well, wait a minute here. We might lose New York 14. We might lose this seat if we don't put someone in there who people know, someone to challenge her, at least, on the Democratic side. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But this is, I would say, that people like Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, I would say that this is probably about 70% of the student body in every single university in the United States of America. That is 70% of the student body. That is what they're breeding. That is what they're producing in our American universities, paid for by your tax dollars.
Again, I'm sure you would really like for them to try to do something against Miss Cortez to prop up Joe Crowley, because, again, worst case scenario, you get somebody in there who's just a little to the left of you, not a big deal. But we've seen what happens. We we know how that movie ends. We saw it with Hillary Clinton. They said, "Oh, Bernie can't win this and that," and Hillary is the polished politician. She knows all the talking points. She's got an answer for everything, but she really doesn't even need to give any answers because she'll just keep her mouth shut and let Donald Trump do the talking, and then she wins. So look, here's the deal. The economic right, they know that your establishment Democrats, your Maxine Waters, your Joe Crowleys, they know them. They know how to deal with them. They know what kind of deals they can cut with them. And, at the end of the day, worst case scenario, you're not really going to get anything too radical. A little to the left of where they are, but nothing radical, nothing major. I mean, they're not going to rock the boat because their donors are pretty well off too, and they don't want to see any major changes. Every so often, an Obama will get in there and he'll do a few things here and there to bring things a little bit back to the center, but it won't last. And then, you can, you know, take 5 steps to the right, he'll bring you back 2, and then, you know, next thing he takes 5 more steps to the right, and you end up going right. It's, not as fast as we like, but we're getting there. These people, they don't like the Cortezes. They don't like the Bernie Sanders because there's actual substance there. There's something real there. There's something that's not going to compromise. There's no leverage with the billionaire class because they're not funded by the billionaire class. That's why you're seeing these right wingers, these economic right, tantrum about Alexandria Ocasio Cortez because they're afraid, and they will never admit that. But that's why they're focusing so much on this.